You're listening to Liberty Sound with Ryan Hill.
There's going to be a new world order out there. And we've got to lead it.
And I'm going to nominate Donald Trump for Speaker of the United States House of Representatives.
Well, good afternoon or good evening or good night, wherever you are and whenever you're listening to this show, Liberty Sound. I'm broadcasting live on Podbean Live, but you could also be listening on the recorded version, which may be on YouTube, Rumble, Podbean, Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, or somewhere else that it might go to as a result of being on one of those platforms. I think like Alexa, for example, you can listen to this on. So even though I don't directly go there, but it is Liberty Sound. And coming up today, we have some discussion on Mike Lindell, who says he's running for RNC chairmanship, an armed teacher that stopped a kidnapping that was in progress in Utah. And we'll also talk about that recent incident at Mar-a-Lago with a bunch of troublemakers that are just hanging around that place. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, again, I already list where you can find the show, so I won't say that again. The notes for this show are in the description, or will be as soon as I am done putting this together. And by the time you listen to it, they should be there. You can also follow me on Truth, Telegram, Twitter, Gab as Foa Ryan. And I'm pretty much on all of those platforms at the moment. I'm trying to be active and participating in the community and all that stuff. It seems to help. It's people, it's like you want a friend, you got to be a friend. It's that sort of thing. So, hey, it is the holiday season, and maybe that's why I'm in such a friendly mood. It's going to be a bit shorter format for the next few weeks, just a heads up to anybody that is subscribed so that you'll know if you're used to like the hour plus format that I've been doing. Well, it's getting pretty busy during the holidays, and I've got some changes coming up to prepare for as well. I also had this successful video that I don't know if you've seen it yet, but I released it on Thanksgiving morning, and it's been somewhat successful. It's actually already that one video has done more views than I've had Podbean listens of all my episodes this entire year. I started in like February in just that one video, but I put a lot of work into it. It's really a culmination of the work that I've done on this podcast and the live broadcast and just what I've been learning from watching streamers, from watching content producers online and getting some tips about it. And then that combined with something that I had a lot of passion about. It was a video I really wanted to make. You should really go check it out. It's called The Pilgrim's Thanksgiving Story. It is only available on the YouTube and Rumble channels. And frankly, like YouTube's the only place that it got any attention on. So catch up, Rumble. I don't know. I already had subscribers on there, but now I have subscribers on both of those platforms. So in light of that, I'll talk about it a little bit later. I may be spending some more of my focus, put some more of my attention on creating videos like that, since evidently it was something that people wanted to watch. I'm also, not just during the holiday season, but looking forward in the political space, I'm looking to actively distance myself from some of the divisiveness that goes on. Now, I mean, not from politics entirely, and politics is always going to have a dividing nature to it because we have to choose. Are we going to govern this way or are we going to govern that way? Do we have a policy that promotes one thing or not? It's going to cause division, but I'm talking about just this constant partisanship. Everything is seen in a Republican or Democrat view. And I know I talk about this already on the show, and I don't think it's a particularly divisive one. I'm just around it all the time. And that's what you hear. It's what's on Fox News. It's what's on CNN. So it's on MSNBC. And even though I don't have those channels, I'm constantly exposed to that content. So I want this place to be a community where patriots and freedom lovers and people who are not extremists, other than the fact that maybe we're extremists for liberty, to have just a place to kind of relax a little bit, and not relax in the sense that we're going to sit on our laurels and not stay in the fight, but relax in the sense that you've got to have a place to go where you are not constantly surrounded by all of the divisiveness. So that's really the point. It's nothing more complicated than that, but that, and along with the fact that it's now the holiday season. I'm looking for some good Christmas background music to play on some of these upcoming shows, or maybe I'll do a video, and it's difficult because you have to find the copyright free versions about all of that. So one note about that Thanksgiving video, I already said all of that. I have a note for myself to go through the video, and I already said it just off the top of my head, so I won't repeat it. But it's a historical video. This show is not really expressly about history, but if we don't understand our history, then we don't understand the liberties that we cherish as a country and as freedom lovers all around the world. So, in order to have a better appreciation for that, I like doing the historical format that I did with that. I'm not sure exactly what you call it, but something along those lines where I tell the story of giving you the picture of what it's like. I mean, we don't live in the same day. I've said probably at the beginning of broadcasting on the show back in like February that we're so far removed from a day where our founders were not that far removed from the days of feudalism. To us, that's like ancient history, but to them, it was more or less recent memory. And it wasn't necessarily a good memory unless you were at the top of the feudal chain from what it had become. So one day we'll talk about all of those topics again. Hey, maybe I'll do a video. So today, first topic up, I'm going to start off the show again, kind of like we did last week, talking about Arizona and the elections going on there and the fallout and the aftermath of this election that we're still like, I mean, are they actually done counting the votes? I think so. I don't remember seeing that reported, but you would assume by now, since they're supposed to be certifying, that they would have done that. So Maricopa County has certified their election results, despite outcry from the public against it. One Arizona county and one Pennsylvania county have delayed their certifications, and more on that in a second, more on at least one of those in a second. But first, let's talk about Maricopa. So there was public outcry at the Board of Supervisors meeting, which took place yesterday on Monday, November the 28th, today being the 29th. And as expected, as pretty much I think everyone expected them to do, other than a very few number of people, they certified their election, despite all the problems that took place on election day and have been made a point about on said channels that I've mentioned already. They did not mince their words, the citizens there that were protesting what was going on. Let's play this soundbite to get it going, and then we'll comment on what's going on out there.
Ought to be ashamed of how Arizona is now the laughing stock of the nation because Maricopa County is inept. Corruption occurred, people's votes haven't been counted, and thousands of votes have been disenfranchised. Arizona needs to vote and count as Florida did November 8th, 2022. Shame to hell to Maricopa County for dragging our fine Arizona straight to the toilet.
And when you certify something, you're saying that it's trustworthy. There's nothing trustworthy about this. This is theater. It's optics. I was a longtime prosecutor. I went after drug traffickers. This is vote trafficking at its finest. I've seen the criminal element. You are vote traffickers. You are a vote trafficker. Criminal. So a curse upon you, a curse upon all of you, you smug people. What, you got another chicken farm that needs to burn down, Mr. Hickman?
Mr. Chairman.
All
right,
Am I bothering you? Am I bothering you? Because this election bothered me.
Thank you. Right, your time is up. Thank you very much. All right, next speaker.
To Mr. Richer, I have to tell you that your voter rolls are a disaster. I banged on over 6,000 doors. And those, when you pull up the names of who's supposed to be living at the households, there are sometimes 7 or 8 or 9 people listed, and not one of those people are the person I'm talking to at the front door. And that person does not know who any of these people are. That happens, I'd say, at least half of the time I knock on doors and get to talk to people. Same thing happened in 2020. I banged on over 4,000 doors that year, same exact result. Freaking out that their ballot was not accepted. They did not know if it was legitimate. They were told to throw it into the famous, infamous box number 3, or they were told to go and come back another time. And I want to know from all of you, how do we get to address address the questions that we're coming up and concerns, the gal before me, the concerns that we have, machines breaking down. You're going to listen to us talk for 2 minutes and then you're going to go off. You know something? I feel that you guys forget you represent we the people. And it's our concerns here. We have no confidence at all in our election process.
Thank you.
All right. And that last speaker, if you didn't catch it, she said she banged on 6,000 doors. It was difficult for me to understand. It sounded pretty clear through the headphones just now, so maybe you could catch that, but it's banged, like she's knocking on doors, banged doors. Um, uh, let's get into some of that. So I liked how what she's finished with, which was basically that these government officials are not remembering that they're supposed to represent we the people. And I agree. But the first speaker said, "Shame to hell, Maricopa County." It's pretty strong language. The second, who was David Clements, and we'll talk about him more in a moment, said, "A curse upon you." Also very strong language. And the last one I felt did a good job of laying out the concerns that the people have, at least on a surface level. And the Carrie Lake War Room tweeted out her video, that last one, in a little bit fuller. You can find that on the Twitter account of Carrie Lake War Room, probably on Carrie Lake's page as well. So you can get the fuller context. I clipped up those the best I could so that we wouldn't lose what they were saying, but it also couldn't go on for 6 minutes. So in these and in all of these clips and in other ones, which I've listened to plenty of in the last day or two, one speaker even quote unquote invoked the death penalty, which is what treason is punishable for, basically accusing this Board of Supervisors of treason. These are very strong words, as I have repeated now a few times. But I've heard no one propose what ought to happen other than certification. So they're decrying the certification. I mean, other than a do-over on paper, which I want. I mean, I'd like to see that all the way across the country. I'd love to see that. That's what I'm fighting for. It's what I've been telling my legislators here in Oklahoma that we'd like them to do, among other things. But there was a lot of complaining and, dare I say, grandstanding. Maybe that ought to be the word of the year instead of gaslighting, which I haven't really heard that much this year. But today alone, that word keeps popping up. And it seems like that's what some of these speeches were for. They weren't actually trying to get something changed. It was just an opportunity to be behind a microphone. And hey, I'm behind a microphone right now. It's okay to do that. But there's a difference, in my opinion, at least, between having a program that you're on, which is about a certain topic, versus going into a public meeting in order to get soundbited on the internet, which again, I just did. I just soundbited them. I get it. But we've got to talk about it. So what is the solution? I mean, are they just hoping to cancel the election in Arizona? And then what? What happens next? A new election is what they and many of us want, but you can't just call one up because you don't like the way that the last one worked out. That's just not how it works. I think that has maybe been part of the frustration amongst the election integrity crowd, myself included. I mean, here at this point in 2020, I thought we could do that. I thought, well, we just do it. We just have another election because we have too many doubts about this one. But that's really not a legal process when you think about it. So let me catch my place in my notes here. So note about David Clements, Professor Clements. I've met him. He came to Oklahoma at least once, perhaps more, but I met him at an event where they were uncovering more of the ample evidence that there were big problems in 2020. And notice I'm stopping short of saying fraud because we haven't been able to see behind the closed doors to prove definitively whether or not there was fraud. We have like the smoking gun, but we can't go to the crime scene to find where the gun might be, if that makes sense. We have indicators that tell us there's some fraud. Okay. And I'll stand by that. And I don't care if it, results in censorship labels or things like that. I'm going to keep saying, I think there was fraud. However, that's different from saying I've proved it and you're a criminal if you certify an election that was stolen. It's my opinion that it was stolen, but that's not something that's admissible in court. And that's kind of my point. So catching my notes again here. So David Clements, okay, he's actually not from Arizona, This was an Arizona Maricopa County meeting. He's from New Mexico. I had forgotten about that. I kind of thought he was from Arizona. Maybe he used to live there. I don't know, but he is in the neighboring state, and he spent a lot of time in Arizona and other states, but I think particularly Arizona because of all the attention that we've had there and the problems that they obviously have when they had machines malfunctioning, couldn't count the votes in a reasonable amount of time, and so on. So he was asked at the beginning when he was being recognized to speak what his address was. And I'm just noting that he never answered, he never even addressed the address. He just went into what he was going to say. I've got to say, I've got a little bit of a problem with that because that to somebody who doesn't know who he is, I happen to know who he is, and most of you listening probably do too. If you didn't know that, you might just think he's a voter in Maricopa County, which is not true. It's fine to speak in the meeting. At the Oklahoma City council meeting that I was at earlier this year, there were some speakers who were from outside the city, and they stated that up front. They said, I'm actually from the other city in Oklahoma, but I work here and I spend a lot of my time in Oklahoma City. Therefore, I feel like I should speak. That's how, I mean, maybe I'm arguing semantics at this point, but I'm talking about the overall what happened that day, yesterday. So then he ran over, Professor Clements did, the 2-minute clock, and then began to complain about citizens being muzzled. But I just think it was a bad look. Again, another soundbite that's going to be played out of context and might sound good or might sound bad, depending on what station you hear it on and who's giving the context around it. But he could have used those 2 minutes to lay out the problems, spell them out, and say, as a lawyer who has done prosecutions, to say why this county should not certify. Because isn't that the issue at hand? That's what I thought it was. I thought that's the whole reason people were there. Okay, so now on to Coach Eyes. And by the way, I would love to have David Clements on the show. I think he's got a lot of things to say. I just didn't hear it in that sound clip. And maybe there was more that I missed, but I'm pretty sure they only had 2 minutes apiece. So now on to Cochise, or Cochise County, as I've heard it pronounced too. Cochise. I'm thinking about Osceola cheese from the state of Missouri, where I used to live a few years back. But Cochise County. They've put off their certification until Monday, folks, in Arizona, Cochise County. That's the latest allowable, apparently by law, either for that individual county or for the state to get its certification process done. In Oklahoma, they have 10 days after an election for the whole state to be certified. This is reasonable. This is how it should work if you have a clean election. Now, I don't know about what if you have something even more major than what happened on this month and half of the machines just didn't work all day, but the machines did work by the end of the day. Unfortunately, it caused people that would have voted to have to leave because they didn't have 3 hours, 5 hours, or whatever they had to do. They could have dropped their ballots off, which I would not have done. I wouldn't have put it in a black box number 3, as I think somebody in that sound clip mentioned. There's big problems, okay? But that Cochise County is not where that happened. Okay, that's a different place. Maricopa County is where that all occurred. And so I understand the attempts to stop the certification there. But in Cochise, it's actually not even true, as far as I understand it, that they're refusing to certify, yet I still see people, even people in the election integrity movement, God forbid, saying that they're holding out and they're not going to certify. Well, listen to my show last week. That's false information. Read any news report on what that county has actually said they're doing, and anybody telling you different is not giving you correct information. They're either spreading misinfo or they are themselves the victim of the misinformation. So I'm going to look into an NPR story, which is maybe not my favorite source to go to, in a story updated yesterday evening that says counties in Arizona and Pennsylvania fail to certify election results by legal deadlines. 2 counties in a couple of swing states, being Arizona and Pennsylvania, turned what is usually an uneventful step in the election process into a political flashpoint on Monday. Officials in rural, Republican-controlled Cochise County of southeastern Arizona near Tucson voted to delay certifying results. Let me say that again. Voted to delay certifying results. of this year's midterm election and to miss the state's legal deadline of Monday, despite finding no legitimate problems with the local counts. Now, that's, no legitimate problems. That's a subject of opinion as far as I'm concerned. But the fact is, the true information is that they voted to delay the certification. They have questions, which again, I've covered last week and elsewhere in my social channels, that they say basically the federal level certification that tests the machines in Arizona had a certification which expired, and so therefore any downstream certifications in the state are invalid, even if they occurred. And they want an answer basically on that. I don't think they're going to get one. Okay, and so they're going to be forced up against the wall. And now there's actually been legal action filed against them. This is pretty fresh as I'm talking about it. It's within the last 24 hours. So maybe if I had a few more days to reflect on it, I could give you just like an even keeled explanation of it. But that's the best that I can get you for now, along with a little help from NPR. So again, unlike Maricopa County, where it might be argued that a redo was needed because people were turned away, Cochise doesn't really have a reason not to certify. And Katie Hobbs and another group that I don't know if maybe we should just focus on the Katie Hobbs suit, because the other one I haven't had time to research. She's suing the county over not doing this now. So naturally, people are upset. This county is trying to, quote, do the right thing. And it looks like the legal system is probably going to force their hand, because they're going to have a penalty of some type, maybe even including arrest, if they don't ultimately certify this election. But you have to understand this, and I know it hurts to hear it. It hurts me to think about it. This is pretty much the legal process. When the election is over, their job is to certify the election. Their job is not to make an independent judgment call on whether or not their election laws and procedures meet their quality standards that they want. The proper place to address that is with the legislature or with the state apparatus. Maybe it's Secretary of State in Arizona. In Oklahoma, it's the state election board has most of the purview there. And that's where the change needs to happen. Not in the certification meeting when the election's already done, the process has been basically completed to that point that they have fulfilled the requirements to certify, and now they're just putting the rubber stamp on it. Then people complain it's a rubber stamp meeting, but that's actually what the meeting basically is. It's sad. I don't like it. I don't wish it was that way. I wish that we had officials that wanted to get to the bottom of this as badly as we, the people, do. But it's kind of like, okay, when I think I was 16, I got a ticket, or a pair of tickets. I missed a stop sign, which was my fault. And the car I was driving had an expired insurance paper, which you could argue was my fault, but I was 16 and it wasn't me paying the insurance. So I had to go to court, and I think one of those tickets got dismissed for the insurance because it was actually current. But suppose I had started arguing with the officer that pulled me over and said, don't you know the insurance? And we didn't have apps back in the day, by the way. I couldn't pull up my email and say, look, here's my new insurance. This was like in the 90s or around the year 2000, something like that. I forget how old I am sometimes. But I didn't have a way of proving that I had insurance. I had to go to court to do that. And when I did, that was taken care of. But also, while I was in court, I complained that there wasn't a overhead light and I couldn't see the stop sign. It wasn't a well-lit area. And I think that's probably why I didn't hit the stop sign. It wasn't that I was just trying to get through a stop sign. And the judge told me that that was not the appropriate place to lift that concern. The judge was right. So that's all I'm saying. Let's see. I've got a few other notes here, but I'm going to get to the point and then get moving along with the rest of the show. Good thing we don't have commercial breaks, or I would just have to do that, right? So that county or any other county, in order to withhold certification, they've got to have a legally viable reason for doing so. We think there was fraud is not a reason. It's a concern. It's one I share, but they don't have the standing, and they definitely don't have the standing to stop the entire state's elections because of they don't have the power to stop Maricopa County. And that's really where the major concern is. So they're holding things up. That is a legal concern. I'm kind of getting redundant in the notes, but yeah, the last thing is why only now? Why, if this was a concern about the certification, they knew that a month ago. They knew that before the election. They knew that this summer, but it was only after 3 guys who have filed other legal motions we talked about last week got to some of the members there and told them, "Hey, this is not valid because," or whatever they told them, and convinced the members of that county that they needed to not certify. But would they be doing this if Carrie Lake won? Because it would still, the same certification would apply. I doubt it. I'm just going to say. So I have to say, quit buying the hype that people are using to raise money off of us, off of you, off of we, the people, by continuing to offer false hope in the name of fighting for election integrity. Some, but not all. Okay. I'm not saying everybody, but you've got to watch out for that. And there's a lot of them out there because as time goes on, you see that they're raising money and raising money and raising money, and sometimes holding events and promising things that are just around the corner, that in 2 weeks, everything's going to be taken care of. Full month ago, Brazil at this point, which I've also covered, they had their election where Lula upset Bolsonaro by just a tiny razor thin majority. Where's the military takeover that I was told was just around the corner? It's been 4 weeks. It's not been 2 weeks in that case. I don't see it happening. Now, again, I've covered that. Read my article on standard excellence about since 1999. And basically, I say in there, I don't know what else to expect. This is not the first time they've had questions about their elections either, but it seems like we forget as members of the public. We forget what happened in the past. Again, that ties back into the purpose of the show is we've got to know our recent past and we've got to know our distant past, because without that, we lose the picture of liberty. And I've heard it since 2020 that Congress is going to throw it to the states and Trump will still be president. Mike Pence will reject the electoral count and send it back to the states, and we'll have Trump as president. Then the 10-day investigation, which didn't happen. And then we had the Absolute Proof Summit of foreign intervention. We had the PCAPs, which were never produced. We had the mules data, which was never released. We have the ripcord from the pit, which amounted to be basically nothing, and then shifted to a Connex story, which was important and had, I forget all the context of that now, but that kind of fizzled out too and never had anything to do with the elections themselves, but had to do with potential privacy concerns with election workers. And we have not heard the conclusion of that. So we're still waiting. The elections have come and gone, and people are forgetting. And somehow we've heard that despite all of this, the midterms will reverse 2020. There's going to be a red wave like you've never seen before, even though little to nothing changed with our election laws. So you see where I'm going. And I've probably just lost all of my listeners there. I have to get all new listeners again. But I'm the acting mayor of Realsville at this point. I don't know who else is going to do it. Okay, and this is why I take sometimes criticism from the left and the right, and from the people that are in my listening audience, even. But I hope to make you think. I hope that we're not just being sycophants here and just parroting party narratives, because that's not what the show is all about. Also, this is still on Maricopa County. Can't believe how much I put to talk about on here, and thought I was just going to read this word for word, but that's not how we do it when we do it live. From a picture that I'm looking at, I've got it up on my screen. I see about 50 at the most citizens waiting in line to go to this meeting, and they're lined up outside. And the picture is from what has to be the back of the line, because it was a picture from somebody who was in support of all the patriots there. And it's just not a lot of people. So, I mean, if this is supposed to be a big movement of the people in Maricopa County who are demanding that this election be overturned, well, they sure didn't show up. And that may be a lot of people inside the room. They may have filled the room, but it's going to take a lot more than that. I mean, we had more people at the Capitol steps in every state protesting in 2020. This is a much smaller number. So we have to keep these things in perspective. And as much as I wish things were looking different right now, and actually had some high hopes at the beginning, I thought by focusing on Arizona, we might actually get a resolution. But I think as soon as they invented enough votes that it didn't seem like Carrie Lake would ever overcome them, That's kind of, I think that's when Fox called the election first again. Aren't they the ones that did it? So, I mean, yeah, it's a big moral hit, but we've got to go forward. We have to move forward and make sure that we get the changes that we want to see in this matter, or any matter when it comes. This is just how the political process works. It's been a while maybe since I've said it, but I remember at the very beginning of working with other groups to fight for election integrity, I had to say that, we may have to go to multiple elective sessions or legislative sessions in our states, because usually the first time somebody lobbies for a new piece of legislation, it doesn't have enough support to pass. You have to get a majority of the representatives. And in order to do that, you have to go reach them, and that takes time. So maybe instead of sitting behind our keyboards and waiting for somebody to come save us, waiting for Trump to do it again, maybe we need to do it. Maybe we're the ones, more than 50 of us. What if just those 50 people now start meeting with their representatives in Arizona and say, hey, I felt disenfranchised. Nobody listened to us. They cut us off after 2 minutes. I guarantee you can get more than 2 minutes with your state senator or your state representative. I've had hours with mine simply by asking on phone calls, in person, etc. So that's my opinion on that matter. And I think with that, we can move on to headlines. If anybody is still here listening to my headlines. Another reason why I'm considering other formats is because, hey, if people listen to it, then maybe that's a better platform to broadcast on. So let's move into some headlines. And wow, I did mention this at the beginning of the program. How does that get you into the Christmas spirit? Everything we just talked about. Well, are you ready? Because I am. Other than the music, which I thought I had some music queued up here to even play. I'm looking down here. Nope, no Christmas music for us today. I'll have to do it next week. But I'm still looking for the right music, because I have to put on things that won't get the show taken off. I've watched live streams get taken down live whenever music starts playing, or a movie clip or something like that that's not allowed because it's copyrighted. We don't want that. So our Christmas lights going up all over the place where you are. They sure are here. And I was starting to get a little bit nervous that I wasn't going to be able to have my own Christmas lights up. But today I scored a deal, sort of, on some incandescent light bulbs. Incandescent, I tell you. With the white wires, because I'm trying to decorate some trees and put them on the house and things like that. And all of my light strands from the previous years are just, they go out. Half of them go out, then the other half goes out, and then you only have a couple of replacement bulbs, and then you step on the bulbs and you go, ouch, and things like that. So I bought some new ones, and last year I couldn't find any. I couldn't find the white wired incandescent bulbs because they were all bought out, and these were like hidden on the aisle somewhere. They must have accidentally put them out there, and so they're mine. So after the show today, I guess I'll be putting up some more lights. And with that, in the next few weeks, again, I'm going to have a shorter format. Today may still take up the full time. I had a lot to discuss. But let's jump into our headlines now, and we'll talk about where the show's going after that. So Mike Lindell, another election integrity person who I've already kind of hinted at a second ago, he had a discussion with Steve Bannon yesterday, or maybe, I don't think it was Friday. It must have been yesterday. And they talk about the elections a little bit more too, but this is some more of what I'm talking about with the way there's kind of some misdirection going on. There is a conflation of issues here. So let me play the clip, and then we'll get into Mike Lindell.
Patriots and heroes in Shanghai on the street saying, hey, take down the CCP, get rid of Xi. We want freedom and liberty. That's what we want, freedom and liberty. You got people in Brazil in the tens of millions saying, we're not going to let Lula and these communists use these machines. You got the military now coming out and saying, hey, this thing doesn't look like it was run right. They got a big problem there. Tens of millions of patriots in Brazil, people that don't have degrees from Harvard, on the streets protesting. And in Maricopa County, once again, the deplorables over 2 years after the first deal are there again to say you can't certify something that's not certifiable. And you have the supervisors in Cochise County are sitting there going, we can't do this. We can't certify this thing.
All right. So there's actually 4. I wrote down 3. Brazil, Maricopa, China, and Cochise County. I said 3 separate incidents. It's 4 if you count county by county. And one of those doesn't even relate to elections as far as I'm concerned, but they were all put together as what? Painting a picture of how bad the elections are. It's called laundry list persuasion. It's when you don't necessarily have one point that's a slam dunk. So in order to make your case, you throw out 5 or 6 of them and hope that one sticks. Or by the sheer number of things that were just listed, surely this must be a big deal. And it's, according to Scott Adams, it's one of the weakest forms of persuasion. It is a form of persuasion, and sometimes it works, but it's not really the strongest one. And what does China have to do with these election incidents? Then he says also, Steve Bannon does, that the military is going to come in. Really? It's been a month. When are they going to come in? Is our military going to come in and fix 2020? Because I still hear that sometimes. So then he moves on, and I'm not going to pick on Bannon any further. He's already got enough going on. Then he asks Lindell, because that's who we're going to talk about, is how did this happen? And Lindell has a few things, too, that I'm going to comment on.
Well, how did this happen? How did we get 2 years to this time and it's still going on, Mike Lindell?
Because, Steve, it's the biggest cover-up for the biggest crime in history. When you're going to take the world and you're going to take the United States without firing a shot, you use computers and you use their elections to do it. We had 18, 20, 2022, all these, what people would expect with the normal footprint that's out there. If this was a normal situation, like just use 2022, should have been the biggest red wave ever with what's going on with this regime. It wasn't. What a blessing it is right there in Arizona that on the morning of the election, all the machines go down and there are all these, they called them glitches and they called it, all these problems and, we're fixing them, we're working on them.
All the machines go down is a false statement. He said all the machines in Arizona went down. That's not even close to what happened. If you remember, which I do, it was something like 25% or maybe even up to 50% in some cases of the machines were having malfunctions in the morning. And I believe that was mostly in Maricopa County. And that's where the people stood in line. There's the videos of the precinct workers saying, you can fill out a ballot and you can put it in box 3 or you can wait. And people were obviously upset with that, but that's still, he was just telling them he was the messenger in that case. But to say all the machines went down is more than hyperbole. I mean, I guess that's considered hyperbole, but it's not what happened. There were problems, but I don't know how. I'm going to have to keep pointing this out because people keep saying it. And it's people who have a lot of influence in this case. Mike Lindell's got millions of people who listen to him, and he's saying all the machines went down, which they did not. Some, I guess, did. So Bannon asks Lindell next if this is difficult to fix from a business perspective. And here I think Lindell's answer is great. He talks about deviations. Let's see, that's the next soundbite here. We'll play that. And he talks about, like, from a business perspective, why that's an important thing to look at and how he would handle it. Did I already play that one? Well, no, I guess that's kind of what he just said there. So, another thing that he said was that we weren't going to have machines in the midterms. He repeated that over and over again, Mike Lindell did. And we just had the midterms with machines. So I would take anything that he says about the future with a grain of salt. Now, with that said, he's making a strong case for this RNC run. He's actually going to run for the RNC. But he's got one more thing he says here about the Arizona election, about judges and overturning it, which, again, I'm going to have an issue with.
Well, this is what we're up against, and we've become a lawless country, but Arizona is the gateway now to get this stuff before judges, to get it before, when they pull their stunt they're going to pull in Maricopa County today, Steve, we're not going to let it happen. It's going to get before judges, and judges are going to have courage and overturn these things.
Okay, and that's just putting the exclamation point on my point. He says we're not going to let it happen. Well, folks, it's happened. It happened right after he said that, same day. And he says we're going to get it before judges, and they're going to have courage, and they're going to overturn it. The only judge I'm aware of is the one that's going to be called in because of Katie Hobbs' lawsuit, and that they're not certainly going to overturn what's going on, like it or not. And I don't like it, but it's what's happening. So with all of that, how could I support him? Or I'm not saying I support him, but I'm just saying, how could he be a contender for the RNC? Well, that's a good question, but I do think that he shows leadership. So here is Bannon's asking him on, what does it take to fix this, which is kind of important going forward.
You're a businessman, and you've built $1 billion company out of a trunk of a car with a patent you got on a pillow. You've built one of the greatest companies for an entrepreneur in the country. Is this that complicated to fix? From you as a guy that went from a flea markets out of a trunk to build one of the greatest entrepreneurial companies, just as a businessman that's built something. Is this that hard to fix? Is this quantum physics? Is this that hard to fix, sir?
No, it's all it is problem solution and know what it would manifest to. And Steve, you got to know your current footprint. Like with My Pillow, I have a couple thousand employees. I have other companies too. But when we see something that our footprint changes, like when Walmart dropped us this spring, what we did is we said, okay, I'm not going to lay anybody off. What can I do? I shifted employees over to shipping with mystore.com. You have to make CEO and moves to not only stop the leaking or stop the whatever's happening, that's the negative that's happening, but you have to then fix it so you can move forward and positively. And I have so many things. I look for deviations. If companies ran their businesses off deviations, and when you look at deviations, you say you had to have a different input to get a different output. And if you see this output come, you better find out why it happened, whether it's good or bad. And if it's good, you duplicate it and say, whoa, what happened here? We need to duplicate this good thing. And if it's bad, then you better eliminate it and stop it, and so it never happens again, and move forward based on the footprint you're in. Our world is changing right now. Everything's changing around us, and it's moving very fast. One of the things about My Pillow is I'm able to do these. I surround myself with great people, and they know we're not going to sit and have meeting after meeting after meeting, and because by that time your footprint might have changed again. You need to move in real time and make great decisions based on your current environment.
So he shows leadership within his own company and really has politically shown some leadership, though I'm taking a little bit of issue with some of the points that he makes politically. He looks for deviations and says that that's what companies should do. And that's the type of approach that he would take at the RNC or doing anything really. And that's exactly the type of problem solving work that I was trained in and have used for years, is to look for deviations. And if you get a different output, it means something must have changed on the input or in the middle of the stream. There are ways that in manufacturing, let's say you've got splotches on your product at the end of the assembly line. Well, you need to go back in the assembly line, look halfway through. Were there any splotches here? Nope. Okay, well, there is only splotches at the end, and in between the middle and the end is where our paint machine is. Okay, let's go look at the paint machine, talk to the paint operator, and see if they know what's going on. They say, yeah, we've been having an issue for the last 3 weeks. We've got a different kind of paint than we're accustomed to, and it's causing these splotches. Maybe they missed some. And so you had a different input, it resulted in a different output. Apply that to our elections. We're seeing elections that seem like, at least to the average person's perspective, that they ought to go one way, or they might be close, and then they end up going a different way. And we say something must have changed. And then we're asking the question, what changed, but being denied the answers to that, unfortunately, or being told that, no, nothing changed. This is just how it is. So he shows leadership that I think would be good at the RNC. Bannon asks him why he's running and what he brings to the table. Apparently, Lindell, praying recently, he is a man of faith. You can read his materials and all of that. He felt God leading him to do this, meaning run for the RNC. And, some might laugh or scoff at that, but I don't discount it. Anytime somebody is communing with God and they feel led by the Holy Spirit, they feel led by God's Spirit to to do something like that, who am I to question that? Okay. Because I don't want people questioning me if I'm pursuing something in faith. Now, if I'm not pursuing it in faith, that's a different thing. And somebody could also just say that's what they're doing, but we can't know their heart. I can't know his heart. I can only know what he says. So that's what he said. And he did build $1 billion company out of a flea market, working out of his car, from someone who had a broken life as a drug addict and has turned things around. I think there's a lot of inspiration behind him. So how could I go from calling him out to saying he could be the next RNC chair? I'm just telling you what's happening. This is the other side of Realsville. And who's this competition anyways? Ronna McDaniel. Her time may be done. She may have had her moment or not. We'll see. Maybe Alan West too. He of course made that play for Texas Republican chair, and I don't remember if he might currently be the chair. Heard him on another radio show recently that heard an interview with him. And sometimes I like him. Sometimes I disagree with him. I think he's a little bit more of the perpetual war type Republican, but we'll see. Okay, now for something completely non-political. The Orion mission, the Orion vessel entered lunar retrograde orbit on November the 25th, meaning it's doing something sort of like a figure eight around the far side of the moon before it comes back. They also call it a DRO, or distant retrograde orbit. The next mission, which is Artemis 2, will take a free return trajectory. And starting with Artemis 3, it's going to be a near rectilinear halo orbit, whatever that means. As with the Lunar Gateway missions to come, they'll utilize the same orbit. So there's supposed to be all these moon missions coming up in the future. That will be interesting. Did you get all that I just read off? So NASA says that they chose this orbit because it didn't require as much fuel, but in the future they'll do other ones. The next flyby of the moon is going to be on December the 5th, and they'll have another burn to put it on their re-entry path. And then other than the launch setbacks, which happen from time to time, rocket launches depend on the weather and all kinds of other, factors. The mission's gone relatively well. I think they had, some backup systems and things like that are expected to be needed. And that's why they have redundant systems. But Artemis 2, according to what I read on spacenews.com, is going to be a manned mission, and it's slated for 2024. So that would be pretty exciting. I don't know if they actually land on the moon in 2024. I mean, I think Trump planned this. Think about this. When are they going to land on the moon? I'll have to find the dates on that. Suppose it's right before the election and Trump takes credit for putting men back on the moon. I mean, I think this guy does think long term. People think that he's just a raging orange psychopath, but he sure does have a lot of long term planning. Now, maybe that's not the plan, but it seems like it with the timing. Just saying. In other science news, Mauna Loa is erupting, the largest active volcano on Earth in Hawaii right now. And it's funny, I was just talking about Moana, the children's cartoon, over the holiday last week, and now it's Mauna Loa. And I guess I pronounced it wrong. I said Moana. It's Moana, something like that. I don't know. I don't have kids, so I don't get to cross-check all this stuff all the time. But take care, my friends, on Big Island, because the last time I checked, it's still erupting. Check today, it's still erupting. Next up, Twitter is currently undergoing an ad embargo from Apple, at least as of earlier today. I mean, things change pretty rapidly on there, on the Twitter front these days. Apple's pulling their ads. There's talk of other advertisers pulling their ads, and Apple may block the Twitter app. At least people are saying that if it becomes too much of a free speech zone. And then, for me, I'm actually talking about using the platform because they're bringing it back towards a free speech environment. At least it seems like it for the time being. So if you're watching this show from Twitter, welcome aboard. Glad to have you. I'm posting on there now and again now. So Musk tweeted accurate to a 2020 meme put out by Fortnite, which was a 1984 parody where they're running through the theater and they had a Fortnite character running through the theater and then comes up and smashes the screen. They were challenging Apple, which was blocking their service from about 1 billion devices at the time. And it ends with overlay, a text overlay that says Epic Games has defied the Apple Store monopoly or the App Store monopoly. Join the fight to stop 2020 from becoming 1984. Well, great job, Fortnite, because I think we reached it. I think it became 1984. Now that makes it 1986, 2 years later. Over in the world of sports, in the World Cup today was England versus Wales. Saw that when I logged into Twitter. In the World Cup soccer, I think I already said that. So here's a little bit of the football commentary from the sideline just before the game.
I just really think that they're focused here, and hopefully they'll get the win today.
Well, yeah, you and me both. And if you see Yunus Musa, let him know that we said happy birthday. Yunus Musa turned 20 today, so let him know.
Here he is. Happy birthday, Yunus.
Yes, thank you, Melissa.
He just waved back.
That's amazing. Well, enjoy the game. And actually, what are the keys to victory? What do you think they have to do to win this game?
Keys to victory. I mean, they're going to probably go against a low block, but quick passes, utilize the width like I had mentioned. I think Pulisic, he needs to really step up and show his strengths today. Make some great crosses in or cut in and get the quick shot off like he did in the last match against England. But hopefully we'll just utilize our biggest strength, which is what? Our midfield. Weston McKennie, come up strength. Yunus Musa, Christian Pulisic. I mean, this is going to be a big test for these boys out here. So I think that's the key to success today.
Well, thank you so much, Melissa, for your time. Enjoy the game, and we look forward to seeing you afterwards. Once we're celebrating, come on, boys. Melissa Ortiz, everyone.
Boy, wasn't that some great sports commentary. You didn't even know we had a sports section on this show. Actually, I've talked about baseball and probably hockey. I may have talked about hockey more than baseball on here. Hockey's kind of my sport, but that's going on there. And of course, the real story in the World Cup is not England versus Wales, much to their chagrin, but it is Tyler Adams, the footballer who got grilled by the Iranian press. And I'm impressed with his answer and the way he handled it. This is the kind of ordinary patriotism that I think this country needs more of. Listen to the way that he is demeaned by the Iranian press member and is corrected on how to pronounce the country's name. And then his answer, and I think he gives a great answer.
You say you support the Iranian people, but you're pronouncing our country's name wrong. Our country is named Iran, not Iran. Please, once and for all, let's get this clear. Second of all, are you okay to be representing a country that has so much discrimination against black people in its own borders? And we saw the Black Lives Matter movement over the past few years.
My apologies on the mispronunciation of your country. That being said, there's discrimination everywhere you go. One thing that I've learned, especially from living abroad in the past years and having to fit in different cultures, is that in the U.S. we're continuing to make progress every single day. I grew up in a white family with obviously an African American heritage and background as well. So I had a little bit of different cultures, and I was very, very easily able to assimilate in different cultures. So not everyone has that ease and the ability to do that, and obviously it takes longer to understand. And through education, I think it's super important. Like you just educated me now on the pronunciation of your country. So it's a process. I think as long as you see progress, that's the most important thing.
So Tyler, as he stated, is of African American heritage and has a white family that he belongs to. I assume that means he was adopted at some point and grew up in that family. So there's a culture difference right there. Most of the time, kids physically resemble their parents, right? But when you adopt, that's not necessarily going to be the case. And he has also traveled abroad and been in other cultures and has been exposed to the bigotry that exists in other lands. Many places in Europe, places in Russia have, if you think racism is a problem in the United States, you haven't seen real modern racism. Well, I'll be careful with the way I say that. Just because I haven't seen it or heard the story doesn't mean it hasn't happened. But what I'm saying is, on the whole, there's a lot more of it in certain other places of this world. And his perspective is great, is, hey, at least we're making progress here in America, and we're continually making progress. Even if you don't like the Black Lives Matter movement, there has been some good that's come out of at least the sentiment And maybe before the George Floyd incident, okay, because Black Lives Matter started way before that. It was when Obama was president, by the way, and there were some good and some not so good local organizations of that. The bad ones, of course, and the parent organization over it all took up pretty much all the news cycle on that, didn't they? So he had a great response. Now, here's my response to all this talk of soccer and World Cup football.
Did you see that ludicrous display last night?
Okay, now moving on to Utah, where an armed teacher stopped a kidnapping, or an armed school employee, depending on which paragraph you read in the news story. So I heard someone talking about a shooting today as I was preparing the notes for the show, which has gone on longer than I expected. But let's see, you got the volcano out of the way there. Here we are. An airplane, got an airplane story coming up next. So let's talk about this school, not shooting, but an armed school employee who thwarted a kidnapping that was an 11-year-old, and it was in progress in a playground. From truthtrent.net, Ira Cox-Berry, an alleged child snatcher, met his match when he tried to kidnap the 11-year-old girl from the playground of Lincoln Elementary School in Ogden, Utah, the Daily Mail reported. Approximately at 2:30 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, the 41-year-old man approached a girl during recess, quickly garnering the attention of a nearby teacher who was watching the kids from inside. So it's a teacher watching the kids. When Cox-Berry, the nabber, grabbed the unarmed girl's arm and tried to pull her away, he was quickly confronted by the teacher, who ran outside and demanded he leave, according to a press release from the Ogden police. Cox-Berry temporarily unhanded the girl, allowing the teacher time to usher her away. And then the article says that he, the teacher, got all the other kids that were out there playing into a classroom, but things were far from over. After confronting the kidnapper and setting the girl free, the teacher instructed the other 19 students to go inside. Sadly, Cox-Berry was undeterred and began yelling and punching a window of the classroom in an apparent attempt to force his way into the building, the Blaze reported. That's when the unarmed school employee decided to draw his concealed carry pistol. In hopes of discouraging the would-be kidnapper, the teacher showed Cox-Berry he was in possession of a firearm by pointing the gun at the intruder. Then, while holding the suspect at bay, the teacher called 911. Police were dispatched and arrived at the elementary school and arrested the suspect, later identified as the 41-year-old that we mentioned before, after a brief struggle. So there's a pretty impressive story and an example of a place where a teacher or a school staff member was armed, kind of like a resource officer or the flight marshal on an airplane, and had the ability to do something about a kidnapping that was taking place. In this case, we're not talking about a school shooting and someone with a gun trying to stop someone else with a gun. We're just talking about one person with a force equalizer, as I called it last week, who was able to stop a kid from being abducted. And who knows what could have happened in the time in between the abduction that didn't occur and when that kid would have been found. And oftentimes it's tragedy that happens in between. If they survive, they may have scars for life, right? So somebody who was able to, let's say, I don't know who was bigger. Was the crazy 41-year-old Cox-Berry person? Were they the bigger, stronger individual in this case, or was the teacher? I don't know. But the point is, it could have been any teacher. It could have been the physically smallest person on campus could have stopped this kidnapping, by having the right to bear arms, basically. So there's an example of, and I've said in the past, I don't think it's good politics to talk about arming teachers, but what I mean by that is that's not the language you want to use, because this teacher probably didn't want to pull that gun. In fact, in the first encounter, they didn't. And the way the article is written that I read from, it sounds like that was like their last resort. And it should be. You should never pull your firearm out. In many cases, by doing that, you're actually going to go to jail, even if you were in the right, because you're going to have to answer some questions. And there's insurance you can carry for things like that in case you're in legal jeopardy over self-defense, basically. So that's a good story. I am happy to hear that, and perhaps that will help change the narrative if we get stories like that around on the whole arming of teachers. Now, I think teachers should be allowed to be armed, but that's different from saying we're going to arm the teachers. That's like issuing, a rifle at the door when you come in. Now, I mean, some people might like that, right? But I don't think that's going to sell very well in the teaching market, union or otherwise. But if you can put the context around it that we're going to allow a certain number, or we're going to allow any teacher who is appropriately qualified to carry a lethal weapon in the school for the purpose of defending that school from intruders like this one. Put the mugshot of this guy up on the poster when you're advertising it. I think that'll sell a little bit better. Next up, and is this our last? Yeah, this is our last headline to cover before this show, which is kind of running over now, but that's okay. It's what we do because it's live. Can't really edit it live, but we keep going. In Maryland, there was a plane crash that caused power outages over in Montgomery County, Maryland. From AP News, crews rescued two caught from a plane, crews rescued two from a plane caught in power lines in Maryland. Two people were rescued early Monday, which would be this Monday, I believe. Yep, yesterday. Early Monday, more than 6 hours after their small plane crashed into live power lines, causing widespread outages in Montgomery County. Montgomery County Fire Chief Scott Goldstein said the plane got stuck in the lines about 100 feet above the ground at around 5:40 p.m. on Sunday. Responders secured it to the tower at 12:16 a.m. I don't know what that means. They secured the plane to the tower. 12:16 a.m. Monday, and the first occupant was removed at about 12:25. The second occupant was out at 12:36. It sounds like the rescue went pretty quickly once they got to it. Now, the picture from this article, which I'm going to have on the cover of this episode, shows the plane. At least from this angle, it looks like it ran into not the power lines, but into the support for those high tension power lines, that are out away from residential areas usually, that have the lattice going on, and it's a pretty robust structure apparently because it didn't tip over when a pretty good sized plane ran into it. I looked up the info. It's called a Mooney M20J. It's a retractable gear single engine plane, which was first introduced in 1976 and tops out at 201 miles per hour. It has a 4-cylinder, 200 horsepower engine, so you can imagine it was probably going at a pretty good rate when it ran into these power lines. Interestingly, I'm guessing it must have been near an airport because it was low to the ground. It was either taking off or landing, and that's when 90% or better of your incidents with airplanes occur, is on takeoff or landing. It has, according to the specs on this, wide flaps, which cover about 70% of the wingspan, which is also a 36-foot wingspan, which is a pretty significant for a single engine plane. It's bigger than the Cessnas I've been accustomed to flying when I've gone out for a pleasure cruise in a single engine aircraft. And the flaps, those are a device on the plane that aid in landing and takeoff. It allows the plane to fly at a slower airspeed, which facilitates taking off and landing when you are going to start from a stop and you're going to end up at a stop in order to land, so that you can control the plane while descending and slowing down. And perhaps, in fact, looking at the picture, the flaps could be down in the picture. And I don't want to say that definitively, but just from first glance, that's what it looks like to me. And that means they were probably coming in for a landing and missed due to the wind changes or whatever. So the last time I covered a plane crash, it was blamed, at least by the pilot, on the wind turbines that were nearby. And in this case, it could just be a gust of wind or something like that. So there will probably be an FAA investigation. Maybe we'll hear some more on that. But it's a up to $200,000 plane. I looked for some that were available. This Mooney M20J, and $150,000 to $200,000 has just been destroyed. And somehow, the pilot and co-pilot survived, and people got their power back within the next day. So crazy plane crashes going on all over the place. Now, I've got one little soundbite for you and then a couple topics, and then we're going to wrap this thing up for the day. Let's see. I'm going to get back to my live streaming tab here. So disorganized, so disorganized. Now, this one, I'm just going to play with very little comments. Jesse Waters, just for fun. Here we go.
It's a great market.
And I want to speak directly to the heiress right now. Dana, hold my hand.
Oh, boy.
Jeez. Women need men. And men need women. We need each other. And if you understand nature, you understand there is not a war between the sexes. We need to make love, not war. And you need to stop chopping your hair off and calling us toxic. We are on a mission. Yes, we peacock, but we peacock for your attention. So fall in love and let's all live happily ever after.
Stop chopping your hair off. I just caught that. So women, quit chopping your hair off and let's make love. It works for me, and I can't believe it. But the MSN did a drive-by hit piece on this. This is from the 5 yesterday, and this little joke that he puts on. And I love how, if you see the video, he's getting Dana's hand, and she's kind of confused, like, why do you want my hand? And he just like kind of barely holds it while he's saying this and calling her the heiress, evidently, according to MSN. To me, I thought he was saying the heirist, which is like a part of speech in some languages. But that's just your wholesome moment for the day. All right, now as we wrap things up, I've got a couple of topics that I didn't have time to get into. One of them, which we'll talk about in the future, is called the PSG score. Introducing the PSG score. What does that stand for, you ask? Well, it stands for patriotism, society, and good government or governance. And it's my answer to the ESG score. It's about time, kind of like I was complaining at the beginning of this program, that what's the plan? If you don't like what happened in Arizona's elections, well, what's the alternative? You can't just say, well, we want another election and this time we get to make up the rules. Now you have to actually go get the rules changed. So in like vein, we don't like ESG, so what's my answer to it? Well, how about my own scoring system where I'll rank businesses, I'll rank ideas and individuals or whatever according to their alignment with the furtherance of society? Because I think ESG would destroy society, and that seems to be what's behind it, along with the Great Reset, quote unquote. So let me know what you think. What are some companies that deserve a high PSG score? And what are some people or some companies that deserve a low one? Excuse me. That's something I'll just talk about more as the days go on. Then also that Trump, Ye, and Fuentes meeting. Was it a setup? Was it a mistake? Well, we don't have time to get into it, but it looks like it's either one, depending on where you stand. And there was a third take that was a little bit more ingenious, which is basically that Ye invites, or Kanye, as you may know him, invites, as a black man, invites someone who is a known white supremacist. And of course, Ye is under fire right now for anti-Semitic comments, and I think he's still banned on Instagram, as far as I know, unless they brought him back. Maybe they brought him back. So he brings someone in who happens to be white, and now the news and the media are all up in a tiff about all of this and saying Trump is having white supremacists and anti-Semites to Mar-a-Lago, and it sounds like he may have only invited one of the two guys here. And most people don't know who Fuentes is. I don't really know who he is. I've seen him. I've seen like a comment from him, but I couldn't tell you much about him other than, according to the media, he's a known white supremacist. So the third angle is that maybe Ye, who is also running for president, is going to become the face of all the racist attributes that were once assigned to Trump. And then all of that element will start following him. Now, this is maybe a pipe dream if that occurs. And that by doing that, it will kind of clear the way for Trump. I don't know. It's an interesting theory. May not be too much of a theory, but there you have it. Now, as I end the show here, I was going to play you an excerpt, but we just don't have the time for it. So I will point you once again to go to the Liberty Sound YouTube channel, if you're not already on there, and find my previous video, which is an actual video production called The Pilgrim's Thanksgiving Story. And yes, it's kind of time sensitive and Thanksgiving is past now, but it's still at this point, it's had over 900 views. My entire show on Podbean has only had like less than 900, 800 some odd listens to this point. So that one video is outdoing this entire thing. Now, there's other channels that this goes out to, so that's probably not a totally accurate number for the reach of the show. Goes a little bit further, but this video looks like it's going to hit 1,000 perhaps by the weekend at least, and then it may not get a whole lot until maybe next Thanksgiving, and it'll start popping up people's suggestions again. But that tells me I should be doing another video rather than the Podbean Live. In fact, this channel on Podbean, it actually cost me money to broadcast it, and unless I get about 1,000 listens per episode or do more episodes and get an equivalent amount, like maybe 500 per episode, but do more episodes, this show is not actually paying for itself. So I'm going to have to look at how I continue to do the show, but that's part of why I got on multiple platforms. So I could potentially go stream on Rumble and YouTube and do the live show on there, do it with video, which I'm planning to get going by January. And then I may have to suspend Podbean, at least for the time being, until I can get some revenues coming in, just even from just like the little ads that play before and after. You have to get to a certain level on YouTube before they'll let you monetize, but they don't charge you for keeping the episodes online. They'll keep all of your episodes up there for free, whereas Podbean won't do that. And Podbean, sadly, is not translating into a big distribution. I think that has to come alongside. You've already got some exposure, and then you say, oh yeah, and find our show on Podbean, and then some of your traffic moves over there. So that's kind of where we're at. I'll begin looking at that, I guess, January or December. Bill may not have been paid yet. And even if I do that, I might still be able to do Podbean Live, or maybe I can just put like the most 5 recent episodes up. We'll look at it. I'll try to make an announcement before any decision is made. But I could just move to YouTube and Rumble. I mean, maybe it's simplified to amplify, as Marie Forleo says. So that's it for the show today. And as we get into the Christmas season, I'll have some Christmassy stuff to bring you, and maybe some Christmas music to go in the backgrounds as we do this thing. And once again, I am Ryan Hill, known as @FOARyan on Truth, on Gab, and Twitter, and @FOAUniverse on Telegram. Don't forget, if you like this content, you can also support the show by sharing episodes, by subscribing, by hitting all the right buttons, like the like button on whatever platform you're on, which could be Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, Rumble, and YouTube, at least for the time being. So until next week, walk in liberty, and we'll see you then. Outro music, Chase, by Alexander Nakarada. Royalty-free music used under Creative Commons License 3.0 and 4.0 International, creativecommons.org. The Liberty Sound podcast is produced in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Copyright 2022, Ryan Hill and Liberty Sound. All rights reserved.